We got, first of all, we got Australia, right? Where are you at right now currently in the world, Rich?
We are coming to you live from the Sunshine Coast, Queensland in Australia. So the middle of summer, which I imagine is pretty different to what you guys are experiencing at the moment.
It's especially different from me being in Minnesota. So I don't know if you've ever been to Minneapolis, Minnesota, but it's been really mild this winter. Been average about 20 degrees, that's tropical for us this time of year here.
Positively balmy.
Yeah, man. So no, I always love talking. I've been fortunate to speak with a few people over in Australia, and it's always fascinating to me to speak over we are so far away from each other right now. I'm finishing a day. You're sort of starting,
Yeah.
but you're also a busy man as well. But before we, just so some people understand, again, modern miracles, we're talking from across the world, and that is amazing. So, but for people who are listening, we got Rich Burrows today with us, I've followed. I don't know how long we've kind of been poking at each other. We're in the same world of curiosities, and I know what I'm excited about, and I wanted to press play before we really thicken it up and dive into just talking about performance and mind and movement and those sort of things. It'll be interesting to sort of hear how you came to this world of breath work and what you're doing. And I'm not going to steal your thunder, but I always think it's fascinating because people who I meet across any realms that are in this umbrella of performance have such cool stories of how they got there. So I didn't want to ask you before we press play because I wanted to leave it up to when we were on the podcast. But
yeah, you wanted to put the pressure right on me.
yeah, man, I
Right from
wanted
the
to let it.
start.
I wanted to let it rip and let you roll. But for the people who are listening, Rich, can you sort of give just an immediate background of what you're doing presently and sort of what you got even this weekend? I know Martin Reeder, who's been on the
Yeah,
podcast,
sure.
is a buddy of yours, and you guys are doing some cool things. But tie us in right now for what's going on right in the moment of your life, and then let's dig deep.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on board. I think once I saw your amazing sauna setup, I thought these are guys I must connect with.
Yeah, yeah.
So that probably led to me pestering you and the conversations which have flown from there. But currently, I guess, oh man, I wear a number of different hats
Yeah.
currently at the moment. So still very much in the corporate world for
Mm.
a lot of my time. Uh, I'm a director of a few different businesses, a partner in a recruitment consultancy based in Melbourne, as well as a security consulting business with offices in New York. So I'm fortunate to be able to do most of what I do online in the cloud. So
Oh wow.
that allows me to chase my passions and live a lifestyle which I've dreamed about for a number of years, which takes us over into the performance side of things,
Yeah.
the training, the coaching, the surfing, the pool training, the breath work, the exposure, which is obviously where we connected as well.
Right.
So
Right.
presently, I'm also in my spare time on the staff at CrossFit affiliate here in Noosa. I've been training with those guys for about the past 12 months and yeah, really building my coaching credentials as much as I can in what is an amazing facility.
Yeah.
Um, and my third and final hat is as a husband and a father, having completed the trifecta of engagement, marriage, and birth of our first child, all within the space of around about 10 months.
Oh, let's
So
go, man. Let's go.
it's it's
Congratulations.
it's been yeah, it's been a wild ride these last 12 months since we decided to uproot and come north. So a
Wow.
lot happening.
Yeah, good for you, man. Those are three full-time jobs. Like,
Yeah, 100%.
so you are really deep into the breathing, just changing gears like crazy, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
So wow, so okay, that's awesome. I didn't know the depths of it in terms of the coaching and the corporate and those sort of things, that leads me into my first thought of curiosity is, what was the corporate avenue first, or was the coaching first? What was kind of the way when you were younger, I guess, or when you took your walk and you could choose which path to go on the most, which one was that first passionately, the corporate side or the human performance?
I think that they've both played out concurrently for a lot of my life. I've considered myself something of an athlete for most of my life.
Yeah.
And most of the time that was playing Australian rules football.
Okay.
Which I'm not too sure if you're familiar with. Slightly different to rugby and soccer. It's only played in this country, but that was my sport for 25 years. Played semi-professionally, but never to an elite level.
Right.
So I was always huge into my health and performance and training and strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
Just that was just part of my identity, but also had a very intellectual curiosity about the world and about business. So took my studies and my academic life very seriously, and that led me down a particular path, which has been an interesting and fulfilling journey, but I guess has also now given me an opportunity to pursue those first passions with greater opportunity.
Yeah, that is, so obviously, I mean, and I know we're not on the video or not, but I mean, this guy, for people who are listening, Rich is jacked. This is a jacked human being. So you're definitely, you definitely got some things going for you in that profession, right? And so I just think it's so interesting because, in a lot of the work, and I know we'll get into the depths of it right now, but, we both center our focus around breath work, right? And movement and exposure. And a lot of that is a full encompassing thing, psychologically, physiologically. It's just a full body experience, right? And I'd really like to peel into what you learn from sports, what you learn to how you train now through those sort of avenues, and then in the corporate side, and what you see in your experience to be the way to sustain performance across all fields, just as like a human. Why would it be beneficial to, that you can take it from there, but you know where I'm going with it?
Yeah, I mean, performance, regardless of what your craft is or what your field, your application, whether that is in a sport or a physical pursuit, or whether it's performing mentally when you're in front of a client or working with your colleagues, there's so many commonalities, and being in control of your physiology and having that depth of awareness of being able to pull on the reins and know how to manipulate your state and your emotions and your mental acuity. So many parallels in both sport and working life. So I feel very lucky to have taken my sport seriously from a young age, from the time I was playing in the under 10s as a 7-year-old, chasing after my big brother. And just the lessons that you can transfer to what it means to be disciplined, what it means to deal with discomfort, to reach a goal and to meet a deadline, or to make a deal happen. It's exactly the same thing as pushing through a training session to get the win. So many parallels.
Yeah, no, you're right on, man. And I think the first thing I'm thinking about what you're saying is just like a cold tub, right? And I think when I jump into the cold or you practice your breathing, it's all just a discipline, right? Just a discipline and performance, whether that's in the business world, the athletic world, the coaching world, the father world, across all these
Yeah.
fields. It's a discipline, and I've always thought about it as like, what tools do you have that you trust, right? And so you're trying to develop these tools, and that's sort of the ice. You see it as something that you don't have to go in there, but it's a discipline. And I know from your side of it, what are some of the things when you immediately get somebody in front of you, whether that's a athletic client, general pop client, anyone, right? Female, male, young, old, whatever. What's sort of your first piece of awareness that you try to instill into them that they want to start to recognize when it comes to being just a performer in general?
First thing to recognize, I think the thing I'll try to instill in people and bring their awareness to is just to slow down.
Yeah.
So many people are traveling at a million miles an hour, and they want to do the thing. They want to do it as quickly and as well as they possibly can. But oftentimes, that's the quickest route to those early failures, and particularly with getting into the ice. It's just such a great, microcosm of life, and
Oh yeah.
and how you deal with any challenge, with any stress. It's always fascinating when you have, a broad group, and there's a couple of, alpha 20-something-year-old bucks who have got a big point to prove, and they're all fired up to get in, and completely lose their rag within the first 30 seconds and have to jump out. And then you've got, I've had quite a few, I don't want to say elderly, but older, 50, 60 plus women who've obviously been through some heavy stuff in their lives, whether it's, life-threatening illness or addiction or family issues, and they just know how to be in that moment, know they're going to be okay. They've got those tools to go to, which, the young bucks without as much life experience or perspective, who want to go fast, who want to charge in there, they just don't have. So slowing down, listening to your body, and being prepared to take the time and make it a purposeful, longer journey, I think is where I try to meet people when I'm first working with them.
Yeah, it's awesome that you say that, right? And it's so hard to wrap your head around the durability or the length of a journey. Because you do want it now, and you never know what you're getting. Is you hope everything is going to be good, right? And even the bad is the good and the good is the good. And I would be a believer in that, and I'm sure you would be too, right? Is that everything's kind of happening for us in a way that we perceive things or think to ourselves or whatnot. But it is hard, man. And when you have something around the world of breath, or ice or exposure, those sort of things, a lot of it is subjective, right? So when you're thinking about breath, how do you take breath work, if you will, and how have you found ways to make that a practice where maybe you don't feel the benefits or get the benefits, or maybe you're not making huge strides, or maybe you're in a lull for a long time, right? But you're still doing it. How have you found ways to basically sustain your discipline in these types of practices?
Well, I think that the more you remain curious, and the more you are open to different schools, different methods. Obviously, they're all tied to the same principles. But for me, if I was just to have stopped after going to my first Art of Breath seminar and thought, "Yep, I've got this nailed now. I've got the prescription. I know what I need to do for breath," then of course I'd be nowhere near as advanced down the track as I am now, having gone into XPT, gone into Oxygen Advantage, dabbled with a bit of Wim Hof, looked at the free diving world. So maintaining curiosity and willingness to go back to that beginner mind is a huge part of it in keeping it fresh and staying motivated to do the work. Because that's one of the things I've found with breath work is a lot of people are keen to try, are keen to come along and participate in a session, but they want the magic pill. They're not prepared to do the deep work on themselves. They're not prepared to be patient and spend the time to try and fail and see what resonates with them personally. And like you say, life gets busy and life gets in the way, but once you have spent the time and developed a bit of a skill in different practices, it becomes so much easier just to flick of a switch into that mentality. Whether I've got half an hour in the afternoon where I've got a break, I can go out and jump in the tub, and what used to take me 10 minutes of breath work to prepare is now just a 10-second mindset shift, slow exhale breath. Okay, now I'm ready. So it's ever evolving and it's endlessly fascinating, but the curiosity, I think, is the key.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to take you on your own journey, right? Because it is it's an intuitive way of training, which I think makes it fun, right? And you kind of use those things as tools or as teachers to your own self. It's funny you say that. I'm the exact same way. I used to not be able to take a cold shower until I did a full Wim Hof session, and you just sort of, you evolve, right? And you adapt and you get better and you learn things, you learn the language of your breath. And what I'm curious about is, you mentioned some big hitters there of things that I'm a big fan of as well, with the XPT, the Oxygen Advantage, which arguably in the breath world might have been the best book I've ever read. I have to reread it. Yeah, I have to reread it all the time. And you can, right? You can reread it. You could just pick a page and it'll be so fun to read. And then I think, like myself, like so many other people across the world, is Wim Hof sort of acknowledged breathwork to me years ago. I came across Wim Hof and thought, this looks cool. And like I think so many people do, but then you get into the weeds, and you've mentioned some of the weeds that I've been in as well, and it's so fascinating. But do you find yourself sort of peeling from their art or their principles and then sort of just creating on your own? And I'm sure you have, but how have you kept it exciting and creating with your own little spin on it?
Yeah, absolutely. Borrow bits and pieces from everyone I've studied under or read or listened to from the world of surfing. We've got a couple of awesome coaches, surfers in this part of the world. Mark Visser, who's a big wave surfer, who has a program called the Ocean Warrior. He's worked with Kelly Slater. He's another big influence.
Wow.
But in terms of keeping it creative and playful, the environments that we have the opportunity to train in up here allows you to experiment. And we had a great session in the pool yesterday with Martin and a couple of the local guys I train with, where we just got together, did a few basic warm-up drills, and then thought, okay, how are we going to piece this together? What do you want to do? What are we trying to achieve? What do we want to test? So doing some dynamic high heart rate stuff paired with some slower, calmer underwater carries, combinations that I'd never played with before that these guys came up with, and like, wow, that's way tougher than I thought it was going to be. So let's put that one in the toolkit and maybe not go that hard next time, but build up to it. So I'm absolutely method agnostic, and all of the sessions that I run or that I coach will borrow and pay homage to all of these great teachers that I've had the pleasure of studying under. So it's just a constant game of discovery.
Yeah, well, that awesome. And that's what makes it fun, right? And it's so fun to do
Yeah,
with it's so fun to do with other curious people too. I can imagine how fun that environment was yesterday. And it's funny that you say you took it a little too far. I mean, we have been the MindStrong boys have been we've been a victim to that way of thinking and doing many, many times. Where
yeah,
you do some stupid stuff and you go, okay, maybe that was a little too much. But that's part of the journey too, right? And so when you're coaching, let's say you have an individual or maybe a small group session and you're sort of putting stuff
mhm.
together, do you program out for people, or do you just go off a feel, or do you sort of just give people kind of a blueprint of what to do or try and then let them try on their own too? Or do you sort of guide that a breathing session or workout session all the way through?
Yeah. It differs depending on whether I'm doing something in the gym with the ice. That ends up being quite prescriptive.
Yeah.
I'll guide the entire experience because I've got specific points that I want them to hit along the way.
Okay.
The pool has been far more dynamic and free flowing. I've found that I'll figure out who's coming along. I'll make a quick sketch of what I think the session will look like, and then we'll get into it. I'll obviously have to assess where people are at ability wise, and then within that general framework, it's about scaling accordingly and scale and that's the real art to it, is giving people enough challenge so that they have to overcome those mental barriers and those mental blocks and deal with just the right level of CO2,
Right.
but not completely um, overloading them, overstressing them to the point where um, they panic or they feel like this is beyond their capability. So it's something that you really need to be attuned with how people are coping, and that's why it's a lot more fluid and dynamic in the session.
Absolutely. And I have an idea of that, right? I mean, I was fortunate to do my first pull training at in Malibu with the XPT crew, and they were very unbelievably just phenomenal coaches, right? And good people and
Mm.
very open minded, and just there was a very advancing way of thinking, and it was a free, confident way of training no matter what level you were at, right? But for people who are maybe going, okay, what are these guys talking about, or what are they talking about within the pool, can you sort of just create a visual for maybe some people who have never experienced breathwork or pull training who are listening to this to kind of say what you mean, what you're doing in the water, or like what's happening with your breath or your mind, and just sort of give a visual for people to put together of how, like, why you're talking about the panic and what could happen?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So the pool training um, is anything which isn't swimming laps up and down.
Right.
We try and be as creative and as playful, spending probably more time underwater than you usually would in a normal swimming session. So it's a unique environment in that it allows you to challenge your body and your mind in very different ways. And we primarily do that by taking weight with us underwater. And whether that is carrying dumbbells a certain length on a single breath, whether that is keeping a weight or an object out of the water while we swim in a side stroke. It can be more dynamic, jumping, lunging, squatting, rotating, which is really freeing and unique for people who can't do that kind of dynamic movement on land. You can
Right.
work incredibly hard and be absolutely smoked and yet have no impact on your joints.
Yeah, it's wild.
The same number of reps of a skater lunge in 2 meters of water, managing your breath to get the timing right, to get that breath as you surface, pop back down, hit really good mechanics and positions, but work incredibly hard with no impact is one of the really unique parts about the pool training.
Well, yeah, I'm happy you said that too, right? That's what it's fun too. It's like it's meditative under that water too. I saw you did a post, the Never Train Alone. That was one of my examples where we got in trouble of doing the breath holds under the water when the boys were, we weren't doing it alone, but we were definitely pushing the envelope. So just for people who are listening, have someone around you when you're doing workouts in the water. But, can you even go into that mentally a little bit deeper too, in the sense of what it's like being underwater and sort of understanding your energy physically, mentally, and then because you're not breathing while you move. Correct. Basically.
Yeah, and just to bring it right back to the very beginning, being underwater without oxygen is, for so many people, such a primal fear response. We've known since we were apes that being submerged under there for too long, that's a death sentence. So if people are held down, spending time with a heavy object underwater, it's an instantaneous physiological reaction that's hardwired into our brains, and so therein creates an opportunity to play around with stress, and it's a different stress to the ice. In the same way, it's a different stress to the heat. The heat's more of a creeping dread, a panic, a real agitation. The ice is such a shock, a panic, a freak out, whereas the water is all about that fear urge, that life and death, real primal instinct to get air and to survive. So learning to use your mindset and working with your physiology to manage that is an amazing opportunity, and similar to the ice, where the guys who try and charge in and pump themselves up and muscle it, struggling in the water, it's always the harder you try, the worse you're going to do. You've got to almost surrender to relaxation and fluidity and smoothness, and be able to maintain a calm and methodical mind when you're trying to reach a distance target with a heavy weight. It's the moment that you start thinking, gee, I've got a long way to go, or am I there yet? Am I going to get to the target? I should pull a bit harder. That's when the wheels fall off. It's really about the present moment and just trusting in the process of smooth, efficient strokes. I've got enough air. I will get there. So such a brilliant mental game.
That is well said, man. I'm loving that because I'm in there with you too, right? And that's the beautiful thing about heat, ice, water. I mean, in a way, it's just nature, right? I mean, it's been a part of our lives forever, and I love every time you dropped in that primal aspect, because you're never gonna beat it, right? Like, you're not gonna win in the ice, and what an absolute counterintuitive thing that we think as humans. And you said this right away in the podcast of, we're always on the go, and what tools do you have, right? But we spend a lot of our external pressure, a lot of our humanism, if we will, is just go, add, right? And it's always a weird thing. I played baseball till I was 26. I've been scouting and coaching since. I didn't really leave the athlete world, right? I just stayed in it, and I remember something that always sort of made me think on my own was, when you're young, and this too, right, from your sporting career, and when you're told all the time about how important competition is, which, yes, I agree entirely, but then you're always told that you're your top competition, but then it's like, how many things have you put in your life to really understand that comment? Because if you're it's so easy to externalize your competition, right? And I get that, right? I get that too, but what you're talking about, I mean, it is the truest sense of you have to know yourself and learn yourself. And it is, right? It's such an intuitive way of training. It's a stillness practice. It's a movement of present moment. And you're not going to win. Like, you're just not going to win,
No.
you know? And so, I mean, what has that been like for you just on your own personal journey of how, because obviously you've put a lot of time into this as a coach. But then, you know, people who come to you for the first time, you know, you were a first timer at 1.2,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so,
100%.
yeah. And so kind of how has your journey evolved from that perspective, right? Were you ever kind of in awe in the beginning of pull work or ice work or breath work or holds or anything like that? And kind of going like, wow, man, I gotta really pay attention to this because this is a me versus me at its core.
Yeah. Well, it's something which I have. It's been a long journey. The cold exposure for me started when I was working in London in 2012. In the
Wow.
winter, the water there is probably as cold as you guys get in Minnesota. So
Yeah.
that was where it started for me for cold, and it was tough. Um, I've never been a super strong swimmer.
Okay.
Um, the static holds used to absolutely scare the shit out of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting too, because I'm a competitive person and I want to always do my best when I'd go to some of the early classes or seminars and be some static breath holds where we're just putting our face into water. There'd be
Yeah.
that pressure that I
Yeah.
don't want to be the worst, and
Yeah.
then that just feeds into that cycle of doubt and stress and panic, which makes you perform worse as it is. So, yeah, I've definitely been right back at beginner level, and I've struggled, I've failed, and gradually evolved. But in terms of how it's impacted my own life personally, it's been huge, particularly I guess over the course of the last three to 4 years. My now wife and I had a very long and arduous journey to conceiving our first baby. So there was multiple rounds of fertility treatments, and yeah, talking about games you can't win.
Yeah.
That is out of your control, and every couple of months dealing with another round of hormone treatments and transfers and
Wow.
waiting for the results, and then bang, fail again. You've got to come back to that real inner monologue of we're on the right path, the time's not right, but we will get there. And all of those lessons from the stresses of training and exposure work and breath work just really came home to roost during that 3-year period. So yeah, super important stuff.
It really is, man. Well, and so stay on that subject. You know, how have you taken, you know, like what have you realized to make you aware in those moments outside of training where you've kind of, are you quicker to, like, what do you go to first? Do you go to recognizing what you're thinking? You know, because in that story, like what you're saying right there, you could get extremely dark right away, right? And you don't have
Yeah.
control over it, so it could be mind-boggling. And that's a thought pattern, right? And we could go into the psychological training of how we all think, but do you go to being aware of your thinking, and do you kind of try to figure that out first, or do you, because of the way you train, do you go right into your breath work and then trust that?
Yeah, I think my natural reaction is to go to physiology first,
Yeah.
is to know that I can exert influence over my mental state by dealing with how I'm breathing and how I'm posture, movement, all these kind of things. So I guess the most challenging moments of that journey was on a few occasions receiving the telephone call in the middle of a workday, busy office, and you've just got the the crushing news
Yeah.
that you've had a failure. So, all right, I've got to get space. I've got to get outside. I've got to just do some balanced breathing, and then I'll find the next step after that. So yeah, definitely physiology first.
I love that you say that, and I think that as I've studied the world that, I guess, the community that we're all in, right? And it's so cool, man. I mean, before I even going into that part, it's so cool that we're talking right now, right? And then,
Yeah.
like, I've talked to Martin a bunch, and what an amazing man he is. And then you guys are jamming, as he would say. There's his call out. There's his love for the podcast. But then, and then
to the big Canadian.
yeah, oh yeah, we got to give him his love. And then, but then everybody, right? And it's something that you hear. I've heard from pretty much all of the people that we've studied with, or studied under, or taught, or shared. It is physiology first, and I'm so happy you said that. And I tried to tee it up, and you nailed it, right? Because it was. I think that's important, because when we talk so much about being in the moment, and in any sort of training or anything like that, your body is always in the moment, right? And you have the mind that is where it can dance all over the place. It can dance in the past or the future. And this is the same thing under that water, right? Because you could feel your body, and now that triggers you to go, oh boy, am I going to panic? Am I going to drown? Am I okay? And that's not even just underwater. I mean, I know when I first started heavy breath holding, I mean, I used to kind of trip out a little bit, just really taking it overboard with some of the Wim Hof style breathing, and just really holding my breath as long as I could, or even doing any sort of hypoxic holding, or above ground walking, some of the stuff. And then what brought a lot of light to that was oxygen advantage, truthfully. was kind of improving that. But yeah, I think it's so cool to hear physiology and tuning into that. And it goes back to how you started by talking about how, well, you got to learn that, right? And you got to learn your physiology, and you got to learn the language of that. And now we can gather that space, which is so crucial, man. And I appreciate you sharing those stories, because that's real life, right? And that's the real part of it. And so if you think about, just for some people who are going to try and do some things in the ice or the heat and whatnot, what are some of your key takeaways, or some sort of guidance that you would tell people to tune in with their body when they're in the heat, and then when they're in the ice? What are some of the things that people should be in tune with?
Definitely in the ice. For me, it's about obviously the breath, the ability to slow the exhale. It's impossible to be stressed and panicked if you are physically exhaling slowly.
Yeah.
Which is obviously easier said than done if you're new to cold exposure, but that should be your primary thought when you're starting out on cold exposure, is how can I get a handle on that exhale, and how can I deepen the inhale, really activate the diaphragm, and get out of that shallow, panting, reactive breath. And the more you do that, I think the more you can start to pay attention to your heart rate, and get in tune, and actually feel that throughout your body. It's something that takes a bit of time and intuition, but the more you sit in that quiet state of no mind, the more you can tune in with these natural rhythms of the body. So heart rate's a big one. The heat, I don't get to do as much heat as I would like, but it's about it's not something that you can force. It's not something you can muscle. It's almost acceptance of, this is what's happening, and I'm going to be okay. It's uncomfortable, and it's very similar to the feeling I had on a recent fast. Just that inability to feel agitation, and and being just aware of that and being able to sit with it is just a huge skill, which I'm still trying to develop.
Yeah, I think you alluded to this earlier about how the heat is just a drag, right? Like you get into the heat and the first 5 minutes are awesome. It's like the
Yeah.
opposite of the ice, right? Because the ice,
Yeah.
it's weird. It's a metaphor in itself. And then you get to the end. I actually don't like the heat. I like the cold more than I like the heat.
Yeah.
The heat panic to me is tremendously stressful. And I don't know why I get weirded out in the heat, but it's a challenge for me, right? And that's a good thing for me. And I've kind of learned how to get into that. But when I'm in a sauna and it is burning and we're trying to, if we're spending a day where we're trying to, push it a little bit, that's my least favorite. Now the pool, I've always liked the pool because you can just drop the weight and kick up to the top and go, all right, and let's clean it up. And it's a meditative, fun way to train. The ice has always been a little bit easier for me, but I started with the ice. So I added the heat a few years. I did ice for about 2 to 3 years aggressively until I got into the sauna exposure. Now, when I played ball, we used to do contrasting of just like hot tub, cold, and that was always just a minute or two in each. And then I never thought of it or saw it as a training tool. But yeah, the heat's always been my my struggle some, right? And but to each his own, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's right. It'll give you an insight into what you need to work on. Where's your weak point?
Yeah.
Where do you need to adapt more? Yeah, so always going to the ice and using that as your go-to modality, you're going to reach a point where the opportunity to adapt and to learn something more about yourself is diminishing. So you've got to look elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure you do. So do you when you're when you're doing with ice with people, so first time in the ice and whatnot, do you ever? What are some of the experiences you've had in there? Have people ever had trouble in the cold? Do you worry about a certain degree or temperature, or do you just sort of fill it up, whatever happens, and then do you kind of try to time it, or do you let people feel it out, or those sort of things? What's some of your experiences been with people in cold?
Yeah, cold, when I'm taking a group, will, as I said, generally be very prescriptive.
Mm-hmm.
It will be, I've got a good sense of what I work in Celsius, so
Yeah.
what a 3 to 4 degree tub feels like in a still environment, no moving water, which just adds to the challenge immeasurably. So I know what they're facing, and I'm going to give them a maximum of 3 minutes in that first attempt.
Yeah.
It's all about seeing where you're at, and the number of also cases I've had where people have been disappointed in themselves for not going a length of time. So I can usually do 5 minutes. I can usually do 7 minutes, and you're missing the point today. We're just seeing how quickly and how effectively you can control that initial response and then deal with a bit of discomfort for a period of time. It's not about winning the ice bath. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to hand out medals to the people who do this the best. It's a learning opportunity. And then if we go a second round or a third round, I generally don't like to let people go too long. I'll challenge them in other ways. I'll say, you're going to stay in for 10 breaths. How long can you make that entire experience?
Yeah.
Show me that you've got control over your mechanics, over your mental faculties by drawing out those 10 breaths for 5 minutes if you can. So it's not about how long can you sit in an ice bath. It's finding what is the challenge for the individual, and of course, some have a bit of a bad experience first up, but we generally get them back and overcome that. So
Yeah.
that is a learning as well for them. So all different levels and different opportunities to challenge people depending on where they're at.
Yeah, is it? I mean, it's sort of the same thing with the heat, right? I don't know. Do you do time on heat, like you don't extend it past a certain time, or is that not as strict as the cold?
Not as strict, and
Yeah,
it depends whether it's paired with the cold as well, because
right.
some people can really have a significant drop in core temperature, so it's going to take them longer to bounce back up, and depending on how hot the sauna is as well. So that's a bit more freestyle. That's a bit more choose your own adventure when we bring the heat in.
Yeah, I think that's so fun too, right? I think I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think you and I are probably both biased towards the heat and ice, but I've never had more of a fun experience every time I've done heat and ice with people. You know, like it is so weird how, I mean, I feel like I've done thousands at this point, and I don't even know how many people from across the world. I mean, I was over in Europe a couple months ago, and that was our first objective. It was like, all right, where do we find? We got to find it. We got to find it. And but you know, so sometimes I get caught up in thinking that we're in the world of, a lot of my viewing and people that I surround myself with they enjoy heat and ice, and they enjoy breathing, and we enjoy conversations like the one you and I are having. Which why, before we press play, it was like we just were sitting there talking, going, "Hey, man, we'll be fine. Let's just press play and hang out, and we'll be able to find a way to chop it up." But I don't see it as much anymore. I still sometimes hear that we're hippies or we're weird or those sort of things. Do you run yourself into anything like that? And I'm curious too, as you sort of had that corporate background when you first dove into this, and we're just tinkering on things or trying to expose people to new ways of training or new ways of thinking, if you will. Did you get any backlash, or have you had any trouble with more of what is Rich up to? This guy's a wild man.
I've always been a wild man.
Yeah, I know. Maybe that's what we all are. Maybe we're just wild people. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's within the CrossFit world I live in the coaching world, there's definite open-mindedness and curiosity, particularly in Australia, where even though we've got similar sorts of issues with inactivity and obesity as you guys do, we're generally an active outdoors sporting nation. So people are keen to experience physical challenges, and so there wasn't so much, I guess, backlash against what I was starting to do. But in the business world, particularly my business partners in Melbourne, who are both of a slightly different generation, there was a bit of shock, and I showed them some pictures of the chest freezer in the backyard. They just didn't get it. Like, why? What are you doing? What's the point?
What is happening here? This guy's sitting in chest freezers of ice. That's hilarious.
So partly the communities and the worlds that we live in can have different prejudices and different attitudes, but people are generally willing to listen and hear what you've got to say. And I was involved in one event which we actually held at our office in Melbourne on the balcony, which was trying to bring business leaders together for some breath work and an ice bath. And that was a completely different crew, and for the most part, a really positive experience.
Yeah.
Getting people from that world together in a setting where the default is cocktail functions and canapes and superficial conversation, take them into a deep physical practice and cold exposure, and then get them talking about their worlds and what their priorities are, and it's a completely different conversation.
It really is, man. It's the truth barrel too, right? With that heat and then the ice, and it just exposes you. That's why I think terming it as exposure is such a powerful thing. And it is powerful, man, because the way I look at it too is you're struggling in something with other people, and that's so powerful for so many reasons, right? And the same thing with you and your family, right? You go through things and you just do it together, and that makes a really good bond. And that's a powerful thing. And so, you're giving people tools, and you're trying to get them aware of the tool so that they can utilize it and have a better life, right? And that's what's so cool about it. And when I dive into that, and I know we've talked a lot about things that we've studied and whatnot. How have you sort of centered some things about your own personal studies? Do you find anything advantageous that has helped you learn more about breath? Do you try to be very science oriented? I know that it gets I know a lot of human performance in all fields now. We sort of feel like we have to have that science taste to us, if you will. But how have you kind of managed that to be a critical thinker, scientific validation, those sort of things? How have you sort of managed that as an individual?
I think, like you said, that there has to be an element. You have to give attention to the science and the academic work that's being done. I think it's important. If you go too intense and require everything to be validated, everything to be backed up by the science, you're always going to be trailing behind the vanguard. So I think in our XPT training, the term that was used was evidence-based. So what are we hearing anecdotally? What does the science say? And what are we feeling and experiencing ourselves? Wow. So it's a mixture of all those things. And 5 years from now, the science might come out and prove us all wrong with the practices we're doing. I'm quite prepared to, I've got strong opinions loosely held. I'm quite prepared to bend and evolve as a practitioner. So for the moment, though, it's a matter of what am I feeling? What am I understanding about my own physiology? What are people telling me? And then having enough knowledge, and particularly, being involved with Oxygen Advantage. Patrick is just such an encyclopedia of knowledge, and has some great resources that he shares with his trainers. So that's such a great foundation to build upon, that we can then add in the anecdotal and the personal too.
Yeah, I'm happy you said that too. And when he, I know a lot of his practices is the breath hold, and obviously the nose, which changed my life. I'm not going to go. That would be a whole nother podcast. But I mean, that really did. That changed. I was a habitual mouth breather my whole life, and I really do believe that a part of my demise at the end of my career was the way I was breathing, and just not able to recover, burning all engines. And I never heard of nasal breathing, and I played baseball to a professional level. I was exposed to a lot of great teaching, and that was a beautiful thing. But I didn't know, I had never heard about nasal breathing until I got out of sports. And I'm very fortunate that I did, because things like this we can share with people, and I believe in it just like you do, right? But that, a lot of stuff that he does in the breath holding and dropping saturation, oxygen saturation, and those sort of things, and creating an adaptation to kind of offloading and breathing less, right? Whenever I think of the Oxygen Advantage, it's just breathing less, right? And kind of being quiet and calm with your nasal breathing. And that's kind of how I've simplified it for my own life, and then try to find other people too. But I know you do some breath holding, and you kind of study your saturation levels. And how many days a week or whatnot do you sort of practice hypoxic training, if you will, or breath hold training to kind of simplify that?
Never more than probably a couple of sessions a week.
Yeah.
I think the sweet spot is certainly no more than every second day if you're looking for a strong adaptation. And it's not something I'm not competing in any kind of endurance sport, or
Sure.
those days are well past me as I approach the big 4-0 this year.
Oh
But
boy.
just for general health and well-being, getting 1 or 2 sessions in a week is, I think, adequate. And like you said, it's a hypoxic stimulus, so looking to drop the blood oxygen saturation, but it's also a hypercapnic response as well. I think that's where some of the confusion around breath hold times and what are we trying to achieve comes into it, with a technique like the Wim Hof method, where you are super ventilating, scrubbing off all of the carbon dioxide, and greatly increasing your ability to desaturate, but at the same time not dealing with the hypercapnia response, which is going to increase your buffering capacity and delay the onset of lactic acid. So those are the 2 critical pieces of what my protocols and oxygen advantage protocols look like in terms of breath hold training. You don't need to hold for very long, and you can add in a metabolic demand to make the desaturation happen a lot faster. So it doesn't have to be about time of hold. There's different variables, different levers you can pull to make the adaptation happen.
When you're doing that, so when you're saying like when you're dropping the oxygen, basically that lactic acid, you're raising a threshold to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
you're becoming like outside of that. So if you're doing a lift the next day or whatnot, the concept of this is that you would basically have a higher aerobic capacity just in general, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, your ability to, and you're probably very familiar with CO2 tolerance, and
Yeah.
the ability to operate with higher levels of carbon dioxide in the system. Yeah, it's going to increase your aerobic capacity, your ability to use oxygen. So, the focus on VO2 max is really pointless.
I
It's
know.
just like having a huge engine with no ability to, no fuel efficiency.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I was playing, because
Yeah,
I would have always thought VO2, and now,
yeah,
and I mean, this completely flipped me on my head a couple years ago. But then it makes
mm,
tremendous sense, right? It's like, well, I should just have a higher tolerance to CO2. That way I breathe
yeah,
less, and that simply tells me that I'm more aerobic, which means all good things.
exactly. Yeah, I don't care how much air, oxygen you can push through the system. It's a much more critical question how much you're actually using, how much is getting absorbed, first of all, diffused into the blood, and how much is being delivered to the tissue, so it can be used. Otherwise, it's just you're spinning your wheels.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're using like the pulse meter and I'm watching that drop, that's once that comes back up, that's the adaptation, right? So if I'm getting it into my tissue, that's basically what you're trying to see if you can move that down, just to simplify that.
Yeah, so the pulse oximeter is just measuring your the saturation of oxygen in the peripheral arteries,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's showing how much is being as it drops, how much is being absorbed, how much is being used, and obviously as you recover, it's going to jump back up super quick. The adaptation is more about what's your spleen's ability to release more red blood cells into the system. Um, yeah, what's your hormonal response, production of EPO, all those kind of physical adaptations which happen after the fact. Is where the magic happens.
Yeah, it's a wild thing, man. I mean, I got some baseball pitchers and some guys who, I mean, we do a quick little step up or super vent type style, and then we have them hold their breath real quick or some sort of if they've been doing it for a while. And I mean, we've seen a massive increase in velocity right away. People have been able to throw harder right away, or get back up to where they're at. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Because you're getting oxygen into the tissues. Your motor skills are gonna feel more comfortable. Your brain, your primal state is more in tune. And I think as you do that over time, that's sort of everything you've talked about, right? If I train like this, I create a higher threshold to my reptilian state. I'm more aware of that panic sensor, right? And that controls so much of how we live, and not just sports or business or life. It's just kind of our thing, right? We have a survival center, and you can train in it with a lot of stuff that you're saying, and that's why I think a lot of people are listening to this. I mean, dive into the Oxygen Advantage, dive into what Rich is doing in XPT and in these sort of practices, because it just, I mean, very simply, again, we could be wrong here in a couple of years, and we got to be open-minded to that, but it makes you a better human. That's how I feel about it. So that's the beauty of it.
But, like you said, it gives you the tools, and to the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but life's not like that. You've got to have more in the kit bag to draw on when life throws you the curveballs.
I love it, man. Well, so as we kind of wrap you up as you get into your day here, and I finish mine, but that's a beautiful way and a beautiful segue for me to just kind of finalize the way we always like to take our guests through what we call our Diamond Series. And that's, it always starts with just sort of, I shouldn't say sort of, it's more of a deep question, I guess. But, when you look at Rich, yourself and your personal life, and you think of yourself as your own individual, what is the why? What is the thing that you seem worth struggling for? What gets you moving in the day to be able to serve other people and get you excited on your own end to be curious to do some things, breaking all those 10 questions I guess I just asked you into one. What's the purpose? What's your purpose here?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved in the last 12 months.
For sure.
Becoming a husband and a father for the first time it completely changes your focus and your mission. But I think more generally, that evolution has probably taken me through at least 4 or 5 of the stages of Shakespeare's 7 acts. I've been the schoolboy, the lover, the soldier, and perhaps now coming into more of a mentor type position, where previously I was probably too focused on myself, and it was all about how much I can achieve, how much I can accomplish, understand, so forth. And now it's more about sharing that. But you've got to have a community to share that with. So that's also part of the mission is finding my people, and whether they're on the other side of the world or right here in the backyard, it's a fun process as they emerge. So I'm not really sure if that answered your question.
Oh, it answers it. It answers it beautifully, man. It was well said. It's a beautiful answer, and it's really cool. And that I don't know how we all got so lucky to be able to communicate with people like yourself and have these types of conversations. I'm always so fortunate to be able to sit on the other end of this conversation and get it live. I talked to a buddy of mine last night, and he just asked me about podcasts, and I told him, I said, the thing I've learned about these podcasts is anytime, and I was excited to talk to you, right? And we kind of lined this up a while back, and I just knew that I knew that I'd learn something. I knew that I'd get intrigued by what you're doing, and then I just knew that it would be easy, right? It'd be fun conversation, and as you said right there, sharing with other people, and these podcasts have been so awesome for me to learn things, but it's more so to just connect with good people, and like you said, on the other side of the world. I mean, man, we are truly on the other side of the world, and we're all we're all just trying to figure it out, so to be able to share it with people is a beautiful thing. And so I really appreciate you saying that. And you shared some beautiful stories inside of the entire conversation in general. And, I'll take you to kind of, because you touched on some of the things that you do in your daily life and decisions and choices that you make. But, with XPT and all of the things you've learned and Oxygen Advantage, and I know you guys are going to run a beautiful workshop here and an experience for people this weekend, and you and some people that we obviously know together. But, what is your mission from what you just said? What does that look like in the future of what you're sharing? What kind of excites you to bring to the world? What's the carrot out in front of you, Rich, that jacks you up to keep moving forward and staying curious and sharing that with people?
Another deep one.
Yeah.
I think if I look at the person I want to become, it's essentially what I want to be doing, who I want to be doing with it, and where. And by relocating to this part of the world in the last 12 months, I think I've really found the where. The who is something we're building by connecting with all these cool people, but the what is, it's a physically and mentally invigorating life, and a life of discovery, pushing those edges, learning about ourselves, but doing it together and in a supportive way, which everyone gets better.
Yeah.
It's not about competing or comparing. Finding that tribe who pushes each other, that fires me up. And I think sitting over the top of all that is creating a life or as many opportunities as possible to experience joy and have those moments of just fun with great people in nature, physically, conversations. It's one of Steve Kerr's big four, joy, and I'm a massive proponent of having a good time.
Dude, I love it, man. Why I love it, man. Beautiful answers, and I look forward. I know I'm sure I'll meet you at some point, and we'll shake some hands and get a workout in. But I really appreciate the time, Rich. That was I'm a big fan of having a good time myself, and so is everybody else on the MindStrong squad. And we're all just a bunch of dudes hanging out that are trying to be curious and find something that is a truth seeker that serves people well. And I think that everything you've shared, we'll be able to turn around hopefully and share it with other people we know and don't know, and hopefully it's able to help them and impact them in a positive way. But you're a good man, Rich. I appreciate you giving us the time. That's a very, very admirable thing. Anytime we get a chance to talk to anybody that sets aside time to talk to us is really important to us. So I thank you very much for that, man, and I'm wishing you guys a ton of success this weekend. Obviously, tell Martin I said hello, and I got to get, now that I think about it, I was offered, I almost played for the Melbourne Aces years ago. I don't know if they still have a team.
No way.
Yeah. But I called it Melbourne. Yeah, I called it Melbourne at first, and I think that's probably what kind of kept me here. So no, but Melbourne, and but yeah, again, man, I appreciate it. I look forward to watching you grow, watching what you guys are doing over there grow, and obviously from myself and the boys here, you have our support, and I love it. Thank you for the time,
mate. It was an absolute pleasure, and a huge thank you to you for extending the invitation. It's amazing what this internet age and messaging through social media the doors and the opportunities it can open. It's just been, as much as it's been a difficult thing for me as a pretty private person to put myself out there and show everyone what we're doing. It's so beneficial, and just love the work you guys are doing, and we'll absolutely follow with interest everything that you got going on. So yeah, huge thanks.
Absolutely, Brand. Well, hey, have fun this weekend. I'll be watching. I'll give you guys I'll chirp you guys in a few days to see how it went. But again, thank you very much, man, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, mate. Sleep well.
All right, cheers.
I'll chat to you soon.
All right, later now. See ya.